usually once or maybe twice, and I suppose for some people possibly 3 times, and over the course of life, we experience what we end up, once we're through the event, calling it a defining moment in our life. It's typically one of those moments where things happen that forever change the course of how we live our life. Sometimes it's something great that happens, and out of that great event, we experience a life change that can be positive or negative for that matter. And sometimes it's out of a tremendous time of difficulty that we'll experience a life change that changes us again, possibly either for the better or the worse. And even sometimes when you look back on that event, you may be a little bit unsure whether it was something great or something bad that happened. And depending on what perspective you're viewing it from, you may be even somewhat unsure as whether the outcome, the change that it brought about in your life was good or bad as well. This morning, as we start our message this morning, I want to share with you one of those times from our life and mine and Michelle's marriage, adulthood, that was like that. And I shared several weeks ago a portion of that story with you. I'm not sure if all of you heard that were here that Sunday to hear it or not. But this event, this circumstances, this period of time happened about 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, life was going pretty well for us, and I had recently taken a promotion at work, and that promotion was a job with significantly more responsibility than what I had. It meant I was on the road a great deal, and it also meant that our family would have to relocate from Georgia back to Michigan. And so we made that relocation, and it wasn't a good relocation as a family. It was difficult. It was difficult for the kids. It was difficult for Michelle. It was difficult for me as well, going through and having these significant work demands and the hours that I had to put in to the new job while trying not very well and not very successfully to lead my family through this transition, this time of change. And so as I told the story several weeks ago, I focused quite a bit on kind of those early events. But this morning I want to focus on the after events that led us and came after making a very difficult decision to return back to Georgia, number one, and number two, the decision that came along with that to leave my employer of several years, my employer where by the world's measure I had been very, very successful. And so we made that difficult decision to make that move, make those changes in our life. And as we did that, that was in February-March time frame of 2008. As we made those changes in life, we entered that time period of uncertainty and that time period of unemployment for me with the idea that, hey, we screwed up, I screwed up, and we took actions to correct it. We took actions to get back to the life that we believed God wanted us to have at the time. And so surely God was going to reward that decision to prioritize family over career success, and to reward that decision to move back into His will and His desires and His plan for us. And so, quite frankly, at the end of February, when I left my job and rejoined my family back in Georgia, I only expected to be out of work for only a few weeks, maybe a month. We had enough savings to get us by for a few months. So there was no real anxiety going into that situation. As it played out in reality, though, I got home, and nearly every job I pursued, every job that aligned well with my background and education and experience, hit a dead end. I never got a phone call, never had an interview scheduled or anything like that. And this wore on for days became weeks, and weeks quickly became months of running out of savings, of having really lost any hope of getting a job similar to what I had, of being able to provide for my family, and really getting to a point where I started to question, did I make the right decision or not? Did I screw up or not? Is this a consequence of my bad judgment or what's going on? And also getting to the point of, God, what's your plan in this? What are you thinking? Have you forgotten us? Is there some lesson here that you want me to learn? What's going on? And as that heavy mood began to permeate my spirit for sure, and I think I can speak for Michelle and say hers as well. One Sunday morning, we got up and we were getting ready for church. And my wife, with a panicked tone in her voice, says, "Look at me, look at me." So I did. She says, "Smile." So I smiled. And I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but anyway, she had me squeeze her hands and this sort of thing. But anyway, I awakened that morning, and I had the right side of my face was droopy. And so, being the great nurse that she is, she was immediately concerned that maybe I, had a stroke type thing going on, which quickly we ruled that out. But rather, it was a case of Bell's palsy. And so, in the midst of having my ability, my sense of security and responsibility as a man being shaken by not being able to provide for my family, and having a hard time finding a job, I had this event occur that certainly impacted my appearance for the worse, if you can imagine that, and also impacted my ability to talk clearly. When I spoke, it wasn't very understandable. If I tried to take a drink, my shirt got more wet than my throat did, that sort of thing. So as these events played out, there was the very real question and wonderment. God, what's going on? Have you forgotten about us? Did we screw up so bad that you just, kind of written us off, or what? What's going on? And in the mail one day came a little postcard. And this postcard was from Indiana Wesleyan University, where I was taking classes online at the time. And something that Indiana Wesleyan does is every year they have a Bible verse of the year. And that Bible verse, written on this postcard, said, "For I know the plans I have for you," the Lord declared. "Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." And at that point in time, that verse on that simple little postcard spoke so much truth into our situation and gave me so much hope and encouragement that it completely changed my mindset with what was going on around us. That card for that year, and I think actually beyond, was placed pretty prominently on our computer desk. It was visible almost any time that we looked up at it. It was right there. And since then, that verse has played very prominently in my mind as well. It's always there. It's ever present for me. And so as we look at this week and for the next few weeks, as we look at some of the promises of God, today we're going to focus on that very verse. It's found in Jeremiah chapter 29. If you have your Bibles, feel free to turn there. And this morning we're going to look at Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 11 through 13. While you're turning there, I want to give you a little bit of background about this scripture. Jeremiah was a prophet, in other words, a messenger of God. God would give him messages to communicate to the Hebrew people. And at the time that Jeremiah was given this particular message, the Hebrew people were in a period of exile. There was a king named Nebuchadnezzar, who was really, by some measure, a terrible king, and by other people's measure, a great king. In fact, historians today look at Nebuchadnezzar and look at his military success and his practices with how he treated people. And I've heard historians say that Nebuchadnezzar, and what we understand of how he operated and how he ran his kingdom and how he led his army, is like taking and combining Saddam Hussein, Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. So if you can imagine that type of leader with that type of hatred for people and disregard for human life, rolling that all together into one person, then you have an idea of Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, and his mindset and who he was. And Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and they had in his kingdom up to this point in time, militarily they had taken over from Egypt pretty much all the way through modern-day Turkey. That's a geographic area that's larger than the continental United States. The Babylon Empire at that point in time was pretty much rulers of the world. And so fairly recently, when Jeremiah had received this prophecy from God and shared it, written it and shared it, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had finally set his sights on Jerusalem. They had all the area around Jerusalem, and he had set his sights on Jerusalem. And so he marches in with his armies to Jerusalem. And because of his hatred of God and anybody that followed God or loved God or had any interest in God, he not only took over Jerusalem, but he destroyed the city. There was nothing left but dirt and wasteland. He destroyed the city of Jerusalem. He had destroyed the temple of God. And he sent the survivors of that attack, the Jews, the Hebrews that had survived that attack, he sent them into exile. They were literally running for their life. They were literally out in the wild trying to exist, trying to survive. So we have the Hebrew people who typically have been favored by God and loved by God and relied on God even through their disobedience. Now they're in one of those situations where, like Michelle and I were 5 years ago, wondering, God, if you love me, why is this happening to me? Have you forgotten about me? Have you left me? Now granted, what we experience today that lead us into those types of thoughts are very different than being on exile, literally running for our life and just simply trying to survive. But we all experience those storms in our life that lead us to that same wonderment, that same questioning. And so God gave this word to Jeremiah to share with the Hebrew people at the point in time that they were wondering what was going on and if God had forsaken them. And so this word that Jeremiah received from God that he shared with the Jewish people speaks truth into our lives today as well when we're wondering that same thing. And so what God said was, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." It's an interesting passage, I think, because, for some or maybe many of us this morning, we've heard that first verse, that verse that I talked about coming on the postcard in our mail 5 years ago. But we look at it and we read it kind of like I just did. "For I know the plans I have for you, declared the Lord." When you're in that moment, though, when you remember that verse and you're in that time when you're wondering, God, what are you doing? Have you left me? Or are you trying to teach me something? What's going on? You look at this, and you read it, and you think about it, and you hear it differently. Instead of, for I know the plans I have for you, it becomes, for I know the plans I have for you. Specifically for you. See, 5 years ago, when that card came in the mail in the midst of that difficult time, that message, that verse, spoke directly to us. This wasn't some ancient text that I could look at and say, yeah, once upon a time God said that and that meant something to somebody. That verse exists for us when we need it most. That promise from God exists for us when we need it. For He knows, God knows the plans that He has for me. God knows the plans that He has for each and every one of you. He knows that. He's known it since before you were born even. He knows it today whether you followed His plan or not up to this point in life. He has plans specifically crafted for you, and He knows what they are. And so we look at that and we think about, wow, God who created everything, God who has always existed and created humanity thousands of years ago and set this whole thing called life and earth into motion thousands of years ago, He has plans specifically for me. And then God went on to say that, these plans are plans to prosper us, to benefit us. Good plans. Plans that we should be excited about and wonder about and want to find and seek out and figure out how to live in that plan. And God says, these plans that I have for you are plans to prosper you. They're not plans to harm you. So, in this moment when you're feeling at your lowest of lows, God's plan is not to bring harm to you. God's plan is not for you to experience harm spiritually, for sure. His plan is not to completely destroy you, like in this case the Jewish people had just experienced at the hands of King Nebuchadnezzar. Everything they knew of earthly life had been destroyed. But God was saying, hey, I know life is crazy right now. I know life is shaken up. But I have plans for you, and they're good plans. They're plans that will benefit you. They aren't plans to harm you like you've just experienced. And so when we look at that, and when I think about that, that's amazing, right? God's plans for me are good plans. God's plans for me are awesome. And they're plans that, are going to, even in this low point, are going to be plans of benefit for my gain, my growth, my own personal growth. They're not plans that are going to hurt me at a point in time when we're so sensitive to hurt. So when we look at that promise of God's plans that are designed to prosper us and not harm us, we have to think, wow, how can I live that out? How can I claim that promise? How can I experience God's prosperous plan for me? This plan that is going to take me out of harm's way and bring me into prosperity. How can I experience that? And God answered that simply and immediately in the two verses that follow. See, God explains that His plans are great and awesome. And then He said, you will call upon me and come to me and pray to me, and I will listen to you. So step number one, if we're interested in figuring out what God's great and awesome and incredible plans for us are, is to go to Him and pray to Him. Go to Him and pray to Him, and He says He will listen. Right? So when we're in that moment when everything about life is so shaken that we're wondering if God has left us or not, and maybe our very natural human response is to decide that boy, I must have screwed up, or things are going so bad, that maybe our natural response is to forget about prayer because our prayers seem to not work. God is saying, you know what? Come and pray to me, and I will listen. God's Word tells us that even when we're concerned and we think that maybe He's not in our life anymore, maybe He doesn't care, He says, not only do I care because I have these great plans for you, but I hear you too. When you come and pray to me, I'm listening. I hear you. And so we wonder, perhaps, when we walk through that and we say, well, I'm in this difficult spot, and I trust that God's plans are great. And I've been praying, and I've been praying, and I've been praying, and nothing changes at all. God has an answer for that too. And what He says is, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. So, this morning, if you're thinking about, maybe you're in that difficult spot right now. Maybe life seems to be falling apart around you. Or maybe you're thinking about a time when that's been the case. Or thinking of someone close to you who's experiencing that. And you think about, boy, I've been praying, and I guess I trust God is listening to me, but still nothing seems to change. Nothing's happening for my benefit. I'm not getting better either physically or emotionally or spiritually, and my circumstances aren't improving at all either. God tells us what the problem is. See, He says that we'll seek Him and find Him when we seek Him with all of our heart. Too often it seems that when we're in the midst of those struggles and those difficult situations and circumstances, we come to God and we want Him to fix it the way we want it fixed. Right? In the case of our experience 5 years ago, what I wanted a job that paid as much or more than the one that I had just left. It was just as good a job, just as significant of a job. And I wanted it as quickly as possible. And so, my prayers were, God, I need this kind of job. I want you to give me this kind of job. Show me the right opportunity. And when that opportunity presents itself, help me to put together the right resume and cover letter so that I get an interview. And when I get an interview, give me the right words to say so that employer decides to choose me as their candidate. And once I start, guide my steps so that I'm successful there. That's what I was looking for. That was my desire. That's what I was praying to God for. And as I was experiencing this Bell's palsy where the right side of my face wasn't working right, it was, God, fix me so I can get a job. God, fix me so I can kind of get a handle back on life again and feel like I have some value and some significance. And that's our very real tendency, is when we're in those times, we want what we want. We know exactly what we think it is that we need, and that's what we're praying for. That's what we're seeking from God. And perhaps more significant of a word, or more accurate word than seeking, is that's what we're expecting from God. See, we've already decided what God's will should be for our life in that situation. And so we're coming to God in prayer like good Christians do. And we're coming to God in prayer and we're trusting Him and we're saying, God, this is what I want, this is what I need, give it to me, please. And that's not what God is looking for. That's not part of His plan. That's not His will or His way. So what God is saying here with this promise that He gave to the prophet Jeremiah, initially to the Jewish people during a difficult time in their life, but also to us when we face life falling in on us. What God is saying is, seek Him. Don't seek the fix that you think you need for your situation. Seek Him. Seek God. You know, and the example that I'm using from our life. Seek God, don't seek a job. Seek God, don't seek a healing for my face. Seek God. That's it. It's as simple as that. Seek God. Nothing else. And God says, you know, when we seek Him with, and this is the hard part, with all of our heart, then we'll find Him. When we seek Him with all of our heart, then we'll find Him. So not just one particular moment of holiness where we've heard a great praise song on the radio and then maybe just read a really inspiring verse in the Bible and we think, I can do this. And so we go to God in prayer and say, you know what, God, you're awesome, and I am trusting you with this, and I am handing this situation over to you. And so we finish that prayer and we feel incredible. And then a few hours later, or a few days later, maybe if we're really good, we're back pursuing that thing that we desire. Again, going back to the example, our real life example. You know, there were for sure moments when I turned to God and said, you know what, God, I can't figure this out. I'm confused by this. Whatever you have in mind, I'm good with that. Let's go in that direction. And, you know, if you have in mind that we're going to lose everything and be homeless or whatever, fine. I don't care. You know, or if you have in mind that you know, I have to get a job several states away and we have to move, or I have to go out there and work and travel back and forth, fine, I don't care. For sure I had moments like that. But very quickly, usually a few hours later, I was back seeking work, seeking resolution to our situation according to my standards, according to my definition. And so God says, you know, we're to seek Him with all of His heart. So what that means is moment by moment, day by day, week by week, and if need be, month by month, or, as was the case for the Jewish people then, year after year. For 70 years they were in this situation. 70 years. God says, seek Him with all of our heart. So each moment until we come to peace with it and we can see that God's plan is unfolding in our life and think, yay, God, that's awesome. We're going to seek Him with all of our heart. We're going to say, God, I don't know what to say other than it doesn't matter what I think or what I want, and I'm trusting you completely with this. We're going to pray the prayer that Jesus did shortly before His death on the cross, and we're going to say, not my will, but yours be done. Not my will, but yours be done. So this morning, as we look at this passage from a focus of really understanding and knowing and putting to work in our life the promises of God, I would encourage you to take your bulletin home or remember the scripture reference and think about, number one, the fact that God says He has a plan for you. Now, it doesn't matter to you what His plans are for anybody else in this room. It shouldn't matter. He has a plan for you. To understand that plan, all God says we have to do is pray. And He'll listen. And He'll listen until we've decided that what we want doesn't matter. Until we've decided that the things that we're doing in life and pursuing in life really don't matter. There's only one thing we have to pursue, and that's Him. And so whether you're in a situation where maybe you think life is falling apart, or maybe you're not, one day you probably will be, keep this in mind. Just inscribe these words on your heart. God has a plan for you. And the quicker that we turn to Him, the quicker that we realize that, you know what, it's not really about me. It's not about my desires. God, it's all about you. And I'm okay with that. The quicker that we're stepping into His perfect will and that His plan is revealed to us. Because after all, whose plan is it that matters? It's not ours. Not mine, not yours. It's simply His.